Okay, we're going to talk today to Gerry Blakely, who was born and has lived most of his life in Nipigon. So Gerry's got lots of history that he can share with us. So introduce us and your family then, Gerry.
Yeah, I'm Gerry Blakely, and born in Cameron Falls on the Nipigon River, and a family of 8 of us kids, the oldest being Agnes, who was first married with Bob Person, and we grew up in Mackenzie, basically. I moved away from Nipigon when I was 7 years old, attended George O'Neill for the first year, and then after that, basically in Mackenzie. So Agnes was the oldest, is the oldest, and she's still with us. And then second is Mike Blakely, Mike Senior now in Nipigon, my brother Mike that lives on the reserve, him and Rita. And second or third would have been my sister Helen, who passed away several years ago. And she was well known in Nipigon with her little daughter Susie with spina bifida. And next would be my sister Joyce, who's about 6 years older than I am. She's up in Whitehorse there.
She's the one that's a poet.
Yeah, she's a poet, writer, and a painter, artist. Yeah, she's really talented. Sends us all kinds of unique things that she either makes or friends of hers has. You know, she's pretty gifted with especially with poetry and that. She's pretty good. And then there was a gap in the family for about 6 or 7 years, and then I was myself, and then followed shortly behind a year and a half later with my brother Tom, who's also passed away a couple of years ago now. And then my sister Darlene Baker, they lived in Red Rock. They're in Thunder Bay now. And then my youngest in the family is John and Mary Blakely. So it's growing up. First of all, in Nipigon here, we lived on the born in Cameron Falls, but I really vaguely, really vaguely remember Cameron Falls. Basically, in Nipigon, though, we lived on the highway, which is now right near the Tourist Information Center. Next door to that is train tingers live there. Then there's a vacant driveway just a bit from that house there, and that used to be our driveway. That's where we lived, yeah. And our neighbors were train tingers, lived recently, was the Marwas, was their last name.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a family there.
So you live between train tingers and where Hedican has his property now.
Yeah, that was all vacant land at that time. Yeah, when I was 7 years old, that was all vacant. The nearest neighbor down the highway was Ryala's. So I know the Ryala's from an early age, and then later on in years when I came back to Nipigon.
So was Rudy's Texaco not there then, Gerry?
Rudy's was the only,
only garage
just a small garage,
Okay.
Yeah, and where the OPP station is now, the Settlers Road, that was just a little dirt road with a gravel pit. And that was our access to Loftus Lake, where we used to go swimming all the time. Yeah. So, I grew up, one story going back to that time was Judy Ryla was friends with Joyce and Helen, about the same age, and she'd ride her bike as far as our place, and then the girls would walk downtown, especially on the weekend. That was the big do, I guess. And we all had secondhand bikes, big bikes that we'd ride crossways underneath the handlebar. Except Judy's was a girl's bike, and boy, that was something with us when we were 7 years old. So we'd ride Judy's bike to no end, taking turns on it until they got back. It was a real treat, I guess, eh? But she'd find her bike always full of mud or something like that, I guess, So she hit it before our place, and all of a sudden she wasn't coming there with the bike, eh? Well, we found her bike. We did the same thing. We rode it, but we were smart enough to wash her bike off, you know. Yeah, I often kid it with Judy about that.
Well, that's interesting that they would walk from way out there downtown.
That was kind of
No.
the cool thing, you know.
To do.
Yeah, nowadays you don't see anybody, a lot of walking those days
Yeah.
compared to nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So were there buses then to take you to school then?
Yeah, there was, I think it was Nipola and Ryla used to each, they had like a station wagon that used to pick us up in that area at that
Okay.
time. We'd do the farmer's loop there to, we used to be Suicide Hill there. We used to come out at Rojo's Dairy. That's my wife
Right.
Arlene's family's grandparents used to have the dairy farm
Right.
there. And yeah, that was a route that we'd ride with them on that.
Ryla had buses for a long time, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but with what I recall at that age, there we were picked up in a station wagon.
Okay.
Sometimes Mrs. Ryla driving too.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fond memories anyway. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So did you go to school in Mackenzie when you were up there?
Yes, basically from here. At that time, tuberculosis was pretty rampant, and my brother Mike had tuberculosis, and my sister Helen, Joyce, and my mom. They all ended up in Thunder Bay.
Oh.
So Joyce was only in there for a short time though, and for almost a year, at least a year, I think my mom was we were without our mom, and
Oh.
so Joyce was the main. She was our boss. She was pretty good. Still is, you know. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. It was, but that's the way it was those days, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. But fortunately, they survived, and it was
Was there a special hospital up there for?
the Fort William Sanatorium.
Oh,
was
it
called.
was for the
Yeah.
TB. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
Hogarth.
yeah.
Do you think it was it prevalent around here then? Was there a lot of people?
Yeah, it was. I believe it was what I can recall. Anyway, it was.
I think Homer had it.
Yeah, quite a few people, miscellaneous
Yes,
people had it,
yes.
and you know, a lot of people thought it was a cold, for example. You didn't really know, you know, and
Right.
yeah, I'm not really sure what the symptoms were. I think it was something similar to having a flu or a
Right.
cold, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It lasted a long time for some people.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the incubation area time, like there was a minimum. What I can recall was at least 9 months when you went to the sand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. That was a minimum. There was
Right.
several that were there more than that.
Right.
Yeah, I had an uncle, my uncle Johnny on my mom's side. He worked there at the sand, just a general worker there, I guess.
Right.
But that's where he's. In his later years, that's where he spent many years working there.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Fortunate that was there, I guess, when you think how
Yeah.
many people had it.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So after you left school, what did you do? I just know you were in the bush most of the time,
Yeah.
between the rocks and the bush.
Yeah, I majored in architectural drafting in high school, and I was keen on that. I liked it and everything else like that. But those days, my dad really an education wasn't even recognized. Like thinking back now, like he said, you got a good job with Pitts. Like we worked for Jay and Pitts Construction. As I grew up, my older brother Mike and my dad had been there for years, basically building the Spruce River Road with 527 nowadays from just out
okay.
of Thunder Bay to the first stretch was from there to Cab Lake, and the only access to Armstrong at that time was through Black Sturgeon to Cab Lake to Gull Bay and Armstrong. So we put that where I worked there 9 years through high school as a student, operating equipment and that. And after high school, I was going to pursue drafting, and my dad said, well, what happened was when I was working for Pitts, my last year there as a student, I was just out of high school in the winter. The pipeline was going through Nipigon, and Danny Fedek, one of the truckers there, he was a fairly young family man, had gotten cancer, and Andy phoned me. We were laid off with Pitts just before Christmas. It was seasonal summer work, and said, "Do you want to drive my truck for the winter?" Because he knew I drove truck, and I was pretty close to the FedEx. Andy and Steve, they both had trucks working for Pitts. Good workers, and their trucks were in mint shape. You know, it was kind of neat compared to our Pitts' equipment, all dirty, and that theirs was nice and clean. So I said, "Yeah, you know, definitely would go and drive." And he said, "Well," he said, "you know, I'm pretty sick," and he said, "Would you actually want to buy the truck?" He said, "This job, this winter, you could probably pay for the truck." He said, "I'm going to sell it anyway." He said, "It'd be a good chance for you." So that's how I got my first truck.
Ah.
And I never went into drafting. Other than last year or this last summer, I had an architectural firm in Thunder Bay, one of the only ones that I could get to do the drawing on the expansion that I want to make at the house that I'm renovating now.
Right.
And the fella there, the architect, had to go to Europe, where he's from Italy, for family matters. So it was delayed previous to that. Now another delay for 2 or 3 weeks. And so I drafted up my own set of plans. They weren't to code. Anyway, I was sent back and said they got to be put to code. So I put them to code. I had to read up on the codes and that, then handed them in, and
And they were approved.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
So after 50 years, I finally got to use some drafting. Yeah. So it's I grew up in Mackenzie, and Mackenzie River there's got Mackenzie Falls. I don't know. It's a really kind of unique, nice waterfalls. Dangerous because it's in a crevice and it's got
And
rock on both sides.
that's on the downside of the road.
No,
on
north
the
side of the
upside.
highway.
Oh.
Yeah, Mackenzie Heights Road.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
I've never been up there.
yeah, it's a beautiful sight, really.
Oh.
You can swim under the falls and see the waterfall in front of you. You know, it's kind of unique there, but dangerous, I guess, because it's all rock. You know.
Rock, right.
Yeah,
Right.
we did just a standard dive, what we knew diving those days. You know, it's about a 20-foot drop off there. Then one time the university fellows came out from the diving team or whatever they were, and they were doing all their fancy somersaults and all that, eh? So that was something else, yeah. I grew up in Mackenzie, and I was the paper boy in Mackenzie for several years. So I got to really know everybody, all the parents and all that. And Christmas time was a real treat. Those days, you'd get tips, and a lot of places, a lot of fellows would say, "Have a little drink," to a paper boy. That's the way it was those days, you know. One unique customer I had, and it turned out to be the best deal I ever made in my life, I think, was those days people didn't really have money that much, and he had lots of chickens, so he traded a dozen eggs for the newspaper, and my mom said that was the best deal I ever made, you know. Yeah, so instead of getting maybe $1 for the week, I got a dozen eggs, you know. Yeah.
But Todd was a delivery boy, and so was Alice, and they got lots of gifts at Christmas time.
Yeah.
You're right. People were very generous at Christmas time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I rode my bike summer and winter, and one of the main reasons was the dogs those days, some big dogs, one German Shepherd in particular. The old people that had him, he was really protective, and he'd grab onto my bike and the paper bag, and we'd do a little dance there once in a while. Yeah, it's quite the time.
Yeah, not too many paper boys left anymore.
No, that's
Yeah, it's gone the way of the technology now.
Yeah. Although I
sure.
I don't know, I still enjoy reading the paper.
Yeah,
I love browsing on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
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 And how did you get into? So then you went with your truck, but then you started bushwork.
Yeah. So with the tandem truck, that was a pretty good goal for me there, because with Pitts it was seasonal, and it was every year, even though it was seasonal, and but But the owners of the company, Joe Pitts, for example, he was elderly and passed the company on to Bob Pitts, and Bob was elderly, and they finally ended up selling the company. But just previous to them selling, we knew they were going to, and their main projects were done, really. But we did work all over the place, even up in a lot of drilling and blasting rock work projects. Hawkwell was another big company those days that was doing the same type of work.
So some of the things you learned were done on the job.
Well, all of it. Those days, yeah, there was a training system in place for the. Those days, they didn't have hydraulic backhoes, for example. It was all cable machines. Drag lines were really prevalent those days. One of the main machines, and it's all cable. Even the shovels in the rock were Northwest cable-driven units, all winches and cables. So there was Department of Labor had a course you could take, a 9-month course to get a license to operate that, but it was a 2-year term usually. You were called an oiler, and when I was first working with Pitts when I was 15, another young fella from Mackenzie, a good friend of mine, and Ab Lettinen too from Nipigon, that lives in Nipigon now. The three of us started working for Pitts, and we're all from Mackenzie. And the other young fellow was Danny Jewison, and Danny was a close friend of mine, and he was an oiler for on one of those machines, and so was Ab. And Danny got ran over by a uke and got killed. So 15 years old, a working accident like that.
Wow.
It was something hard to get over, and
Yeah.
then not long after that, Ab got his hand caught in the gear
Right.
system and lost his fingers on one
Right.
hand, almost all his fingers, eh?
Right.
So there I was that summer, like thinking that strike three is looking at me. So I was actually really, my first year of work there, I was really scared of what could happen,
Right.
Yeah, it was dangerous. It's still dangerous out there nowadays. Things can happen, but a lot of training nowadays, a lot better training. Yeah,
Right.
The equipment those days too. I remember a lot of equipment, the big rock trucks with ukes we had. You're lucky to have real good brake systems on it. Eh?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's the way the equipment was. Wasn't really, if it worked, that was fine enough. It was not like today's
Not
standards
like
at all.
today.
Yeah.
We're going to stop right there, and Zach's going to reset the camera. Okay, we're just going to continue talking to Gerry about some of the jobs and the places that he's been and worked.
Yeah, and through the years, right from when I was young, I was always interested in rocks. Like even as a kid, I was marveled at the different, just the different look of a rock and all that, and didn't know any of the geology of it or anything of that sort. But I was a rock collector when I was young, and when we got out of high school, working for Pitts and that, there was pretty good money, and so I bought a fairly new car at one stage there. My first car was a 1950 Ford that I bought for $100, plus they filled the gas tank up for me. So that lasted me for a few years. It burnt oil, burnt more oil than gas. And one neat story about that Ford was Andy Manula. His family owns Shunya Contracting nowadays. Neil was one of his sons, and Neil just passed away. And Shunya Contracting still exists today, but Andy was the grandfather of them. And when Andy retired, he bought a little service station in Mackenzie just for a hobby. Got to talk to all his friends that way. And so me and Ab would go to the Dorian Dance, was a big thing on the weekend. And no money, so if we had $2 for gas, that was enough to get there and back. And we'd go to Andy's there and get some gas. And where are you guys going tonight? We're going to Dorian, and he knew the Dorian Dance, and that was the big thing every once a month or whatever. And so we'd get $2 worth of gas, and And whoa, Andy, we only $2 because he's at 250 already. Eh? Well, you got to make sure you don't run out of gas. And never charged extra. Like, where would you go nowadays to get some gas, and the person serving gas make
Yeah.
sure you're not? It was
Yeah.
so different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So always marveled with rocks, and then I bought a fairly new car, a '67 Chevelle, and it was what we called it. We souped it up, and that was the big thing those days. You know, you spent more time. We thought we were mechanics, you know, but anyway. One of my first trips, me and a friend of mine, Richard Poughton, and he's still a good friend of mine. He's out in Fort McMurray. We did automotive, built a couple of cars in high school and sold them and that, and bought this Chevelle and fixed it up, and then decided to go to the Indy 500. And that was a big venture out of Mackenzie. No GPS. You're lucky to get a map those days, but knew about the races those days. That was the number one race, you know, and so we ventured. That was a venture to go there. We fixed up an old pup tent trailer, put new bearings in it and all that, and sleeping bags and a little Coleman stove. No plans really. Figured we'd be gone in about a week or so, you know, and anyway, the way we went, and I think we had about $400 a piece on us, which was quite a bit of money, but the way we went, and so we went to the Indy 500, but met a lot of fellas there about the same age as us, and they were all racing fanatics or whatever, and American fellas, you know. It was so different for us to meet guys with the same interest.
Yeah.
They invited us to other races nearby and that, and we followed the group, and we ended up close to Texas, which was about another 2 weeks after the race, and no plans. And well, we went to Texas, and then Mexico's not too far away. Went to Mexico, the Juarez and El Paso, and then went through New Mexico and came out in San Diego, and then followed the old highway, went all the way up to Vancouver, and then back home 6 weeks later, completely broke. But my car was weighed down with probably 1,000 pounds of rock or more, because in New Mexico they had these godes or geodes,
Yeah.
and selling them there. And I told Richard, because I was interested in rock and geology, I said, there's like a terrain exposure of the same type of rock not too far from there, about 10 miles away. And it looked to be only about a mile off of the highway. And I walked and walked. It turned out to be a good mile, or maybe a mile and a half. And I came back with about 30 pounds of geodes that I found there. I often wanted to go back there to see if, you know, I'm sure it's been well staked and claimed by then, eh?
Yeah, I would think so.
But Richard's saying, what are you doing with all this rock? He had nothing to do with rock, and he thought I had rocks in my heads, and I still do to this day, I guess. So that was the start of rock collecting and that kind of thing. And I brought the most of my rock, those golds and other rock, to Castang's Rock Shop. Used to be on
Yeah.
Lakeshore Drive there.
Yeah.
That was the main highway at the time, and they did a lot of my cutting and polishing in the early days. I do that on
Yeah,
my
they
own.
had a little store in Thunder Bay as well.
Yeah.
In Fort William. I remember
Yeah.
going there.
They had a camp up in Pearl that also did fabricating there,
Oh,
with buildings with cement floors and all that. And I own those. I own that property now, and it's
Oh,
kind of
okay.
neat to think. 50 years ago I knew about it and ended
Yeah.
up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So
Yeah.
you got really interested in geology then. That's,
Yeah,
when
I-
I think of you now, I don't think of the bush. I think of the geology.
Yeah, so when I was logging, once with pits going back to the truck there, it was seasonal work, and in winters it was good money. Even we made enough during the seasonal work. It was fine. There was we made pretty good money with the truck and that, where I did, and but boring through the winter. Like what do you do with all your time fishing and all that? All right, but so me and Johnny. My brother-in-law Melvin Ristonen bought a piece of property on the Cameron Falls Road, and said he had access to some real nice jack pine The only problem was it was on the other side of the bridge on the Fraser Lake Road, where Ernie Pink had his trapper shack. So it was, and the reason why it was still there is the bridge wasn't usable. You could go over it with a car, but not to use with the trucks because it was load rated, for light vehicles only.
Right.
So with my architectural interest, I also was pretty keen on building bridges and trying to design bridges on my own. I worked with an old fella that actually built bridges, timber bridges, and when I seen that, and I said, well, that's easy. In 3 days, me and Johnny had a new bridge put in that we built ourselves and put it in on Fraser Road. And I walked my D8 across it and hauled wood out of there, and that bridge was used for many years. It's funny, the standards nowadays, everything's got to be engineered.
Yeah.
In those days, you just could go and get a permit to put a bridge in on a public road.
So which bridge on the Fraser Road? The first one?
Yeah, the big bridge.
Over that water, where the water roars down
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got the bridge in, and sure enough, we cut all that jack pine out. That was our first project in the logging business. But through the years of logging, we started out with the skidders and power saws, and then later years ended up going fully mechanical and several pieces of equipment and trucks and all that. But as I was logging, I was always
Looking at rocks.
scratching more ground, looking for rock. Wherever I logged, I did a lot of stripping, surface stripping with the bulldozer. And so that's where actually most of my claims, or some of my claims today exist, where I had originally logged, years ago. But I'm basically interested in dimensional stone, which is it's quarried with a wire saw nowadays. The old system used to be line drilling, where they'd use a light explosive like a det cord, but nowadays it's all sawed out with a diamond wire saw.
Oh.
And blocks. Right now, I've got one company that fabricates in the States for me, and this coming summer I'll probably have my own facility in Nipigon here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what type of things are you fabricating?
The main thing, the main market is for countertops, like countertop material.
Right.
I'd produce a slab that the countertop companies would buy those slabs, and they cut the intricate details out for the kitchens. I just supply the what they call it's a slab market is what they call. That's the main market. Another one is like flooring tile or interior exterior veneer, and that's various sizes from, it could be 1 foot square to the common size is 2 feet squared or 2 by 4 veneer sizes, and it goes on, especially in the States nowadays. Outdoor living, they call it, is big. Where all the outside kitchen is all stone, a lot of stone tabletops and countertops used outside. And now we're matching those same tabletops and that with any of the surrounding ledging and even the outdoor tiles it's kind of a matched product nowadays,
So is it a special kind of rock or stone that you're using, Gerry? Or?
Nothing in particular special, other than most of it is a granite, and there's other semi-forms of granite, I guess you could say it in general, and it's called a gneiss stone, which is a lot of people call it a gneiss. It's a swirly black and white. That's a big stone that we're pushing right now.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of my semi-precious stones too, like amethyst, and that could be made in the tabletops, like more decorative tabletop and that,
Right.
It's kind of a different market than the.
So are you
the
still
slabs.
getting rock from Canada then,
Yeah,
and taking it to the States to be
Yeah.
fabricated?
yeah. I've got some licensed leased areas. They're called a lease license. That I have stone. One of the main sites is in Marathon right now, and it's a spectrolite. It's a semi-precious stone as well. It's got a real Schiller effect when the sun radiates off of that. And then the amethyst, quite large amethyst claim in pearl.
Oh,
I've got 2 large leases there, and about 1,000 acres under claim in that area there.
Okay.
It's a big area.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're busy all the time then with
Yeah,
that.
and then 2 new sites right in Nipigon here with the nice stone or nice, whatever terminology you want to use on it.
Right.
Yeah, that's 2 new sites that we're definitely going to open up this summer.
Okay.
Yeah, right in Nipigon.
Right.
So I'd like to get at least initial fabricating. They call it it would be a slab shop at least at a minimum, where we send out slabs instead of blocks, and that way there we know for sure that there's no fractures or cracks in the
Okay.
block,
Yeah.
and good consistent color in that.
Right.
That'd be kind of our first stage of fabricating.
Right.
And second to that would be go into full fabricating. It'll
Right.
be a step-by-step procedure. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So busy with
Because
that.
you did the piece of rock over at the Paddle to the Sea.
Yeah, that's the local. That's a piece of the nice stone that we're promoting here. It's the same type of stone was sent to the stone shows in the States last winter,
Okay.
and for market testing to see all the different companies, and it's been really receptive. That
Right.
particular stone, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got it right here. That's the thing.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
It's a common stone like throughout any bedrock areas, but to get it in black and white, a good black and white color and consistent isn't that common. That's the thing. It's
Right.
usually a lot of pink comes into that type of stone, like from the granite associated with it, and whereas we've got a good stone that is just the black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of nice because all those different types of stone, I don't, they would not ring a bell with me, the names of them, but I guess when you see them,
Yeah.
they're all different names then.
Yeah, made up and get different names from the different compositions they're made out of. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, granite's very popular, that's for sure now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Granite countertops and tabletops are.
Oh
very
yeah, and
popular.
even more so, it's getting, especially in the States, it's really picking up. Southern Ontario as well, though, a lot of stone, whereas in Europe it's all stone.
All
you know.
stone,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
we're,
Yeah.
it's got a good demand, all right.
Right.
And nowadays too, our big competition was like say Brazil and China, but nowadays with the green and energy saving and environmental friendly fabricating of the stone, is to buy local stone is a way less impact on everything.
Right.
You know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of opening the door for local stone.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. You give us lots of information, and lots of information about rock, and that is a big thing around here, because we always say northwestern Ontario is all rock. So
Yeah.
at least you're making use of the rock.
Yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, it's as it started out just being a hobby. Now it's got like a business interest. All right,
Right.
that can be passed on for sure.
That's good. Thank
Yeah.
you. So Gerry's continuing, but he's going to tell us a couple of stories, unique stories about Nipigon area.
Yeah, one of the things, like I was telling Glenna, that you often think back, what's the most amazing or surprising thing that might have happened to you in your lifetime, and that. And one time about 30 years ago, me and Arlene were coming back from Thunder Bay to Nipigon, and we took the old Hercot Loop, which used to be the main highway. And on the Hercot Loop there, there's a real predominant curve right underneath the hydro line. We're just driving along there, just kind of browsing around, in no hurry to get back home and a nice day. And there was a big black bear on the middle of the road just ahead of us, and it was exceptionally big. Like we said, wow, look at that. And for some reason it was spooked. It really got spooked. It was a bit of a distance away from us, but it really got spooked and bolted towards the tree line. Full blast, bent down and like a greyhound. Like this big thing was really moving, eh? And bored into the bush like that, and all of a sudden the bear comes out of the bush airborne, about 20 feet in the air, his rear end first, out into almost back onto the highway. I mean, it flew about 20 feet in the air and about 30 feet back. And what on earth would make I mean, we couldn't believe our eyes. It rolled around a little bit and bolted back in. This time it came out again, but not as bad as the first time, but was kicked out of the bush again, rolled around again. I mean, you just, what can throw a bear backwards in the air like that? It'd be something to put in the newspaper to say, guess, I wonder what would cause that.
Right.
You know, like, what would you think? You know?
Another bear, I guess. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to bolt something that far in the air,
Yeah,
like, it'd be just as if it was hit by a transport truck or something like that. I mean, really flew away.
Wow.
And so that happened, and when I got to that location there, I said, what on earth was that? I couldn't believe my eyes. So I walked in there, and about 3 feet in the bush line was an old fence. And so what he did is he ran so hard into that fence in that particular area there, it had enough give that he probably pushed it back and it threw him back out. But I mean, to see that, now you're just wondering what in the heck could that be. So that's got to be the most amazing thing I ever. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and an old timer in Nipigon here used to be Romeo O'Clair. He was a logging contractor, quite different than me. Those days they had the buck saws and all that, and old mining camps and heavy labor work, loading everything by hand and that. And they'd load the cars by hand, sort out the veneer, McCaskill, and ended up with half a dozen cars there, and they'd take that to, that was their bonus for the spring break. And it was a big party is what it was. And anyway, one time they all went down, cashed that big check, and went to Montreal and all that, where Romeo had all his friends and that. They actually ended up in Florida with Mackinac pants on. So it was one party that lasted 2 or 3 weeks on the train. So that was something else.
He was well known here.
Yeah, he was quite a character.
Yeah.
How are you for time?
Yeah.
Yeah. One other story about Romeo, the old dump site in Nipigon used to be behind which is the Petrocan now, and used to be a lot of cars there, and at that time it was no longer the dump for garbage. It was just strictly a car dump at that time. And I'd drive in there once in a while because one of the things is any of the wrecks, if you had an older truck like I had, well, a lot of times there was parts there. And Arlene was with me again that time, and I had a 73 Dodge half-ton, and it was getting old then, and it needed an exhaust system. And there's a fairly new, well, looked like a brand new actually, Dodge that was in an accident, and it had been rolled into the pile there, and it wasn't upside down. It was in the pile. But I could see it had a new exhaust system on it, and I was thinking, oh, would I like to have that, you know, like it was like being in the store, eh? And if I had my skidder here, I'd flip that upside down, and I'd have that exhaust out in 5 minutes. I no sooner said that to Arlene, and room, through that back road there comes Romeo with his skidder, and he flips the truck upside down for me, exactly what I had just said I wished I had. And I said, oh, geez, I don't have the wrench on me. He reaches in his pocket. He's got a 1/2 inch 9/16 wrench. We took the muffler off and everything else right there. So that's a pretty...
And you know what? Some people are still doing that today, Gerry, looking in the dump for little parts.
But the unique thing about that was me saying everything. I wish I had the skidder. I wish I had the wrench. And what's the odds of him being there? Yeah. Very similar in Cam one time when I borrowed my dad's camper. It was built on a 3/4 ton truck, homemade camper, and me and Richard were going to go fishing in Cam for the weekend, and we're going to use that as a camper. We drove through this field, and it was clay, got into a soft area there and sunk this big camper right down to the floorboards. I said, nothing's going to get this out of here other than a skidder. And the same thing as Romeo's thing, the old farmer came by coming out of the bush with his skidder and pulled us out. Unreal. Those really stand out, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Good stories.
Yeah. Anyway, one last thing is my grandparents and I, my dad and mom, they had their houses up in Cameron there, just past the first Bailey Bridge there. And my dad had the pigs on the island, and a lot of the old timers like Ted Nyman and that still remember, they still call it Pig Island. And that's where my dad kept his pigs on the island. They were.
Now, tell me where that island was. Bert tried to explain to me, but I missed where is that?
You cross the first Bailey Bridge at Alexander,
Yeah,
and the first little driveway to the right goes out to the point there.
right.
And from the point you can actually see the Bailey Bridge.
Oh.
But just straight in that channel there is
a little island.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Pig Island, yeah.
Pig Island.
Yeah.
Oh. They kept pigs on there.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it would save a lot of fencing, I guess, or something good. They rooted there all summer, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I was out to that site, like I usually go out there quite often on my birthday because I was born right there, eh? And I was rummaging around where the house and that used to be, and I came just out of the ground was a little piece of metal. I took it out, and here was a metal truck, a heavy-duty metal truck. The no tires on it, they were rotted off and that. And I took it to my brother Mike, and Mike looked at that. He said, "Where did you get that from?" It was his truck
Oh my.
from
goodness.
about 50 years ago. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Full stories.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, my grandparents living out there, probably, I don't remember this, but I was told about it. They'd go to, the big do was to go to Nipigon on the weekend, go out to the bars, I guess, in the evening, you know, and that was the lifestyle then. And my mom and dad were going to go, and my grandfather wasn't ready to go, and they said, "Aren't you coming in?" He said, "No, I don't think I'm going to come in." But my grandmother and my mom and dad, he said, "If I wanted to go," he said, "I can get there a lot faster than that car through that mud hole all the way from Cameron to," which he was probably right. But it's it's about 15 miles, eh? And anyway, he said, "No, I'm not. If I want to go, I can get there quicker than that." So they left. They came around downtown. The main highways were on the Nipigon Cafe, and that was the main Trans-Canada Highway at that time. They pulled over the tracks and go down the main street. And here's my grandfather on the sidewalk, waved to them, casual wave. Like, what the heck? He's there before them. And the same thing, like, what? How in the heck did he get there? It's impossible, eh? Not winded or nothing, yet he's there. But you know what he actually did, eh? On the back of the car was one of those spare tire racks and that, and a little kind of platform or whatever.
Yep.
So when they left, he got onto that quietly, I guess, like so nobody would notice it. Rode the car all the way to Nipigon, and on the curve at the Nipigon Cafe, he jumped off there and ran across the tracks and beat them to the bar.
Great story for
Yeah.
sure. And Ada Stanley, did you know her, Gerry?
Stanley's?
Ada Stanley, yeah.
No.
Okay, but they lived in Shorty was his name, Shorty Stanley. They worked in Cameron Falls, but she always told us about they walked the railway tracks when they wanted to come to town on the weekend.
Yeah.
They didn't have a vehicle. They walked the railway
Yeah.
line to come to Nipigon for the weekend.
Unreal, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of stories from Cameron Falls, likely.
Yeah.
Okay.